Hi everyone, my name is Zain Azim. I'm the founder and CEO of Keyri. In this tutorial series, we will be creating a web app and companion mobile app that incorporate sign-in with QR powered by Keyri. In the first part of this series, we'll be creating a web app that looks like this. And in the second part, we'll be creating a Flutter mobile app that actually enables the QR login. And so the web app that we're making here will be largely based on the Next.js quick start that's provided by Supabase. And so let's get started by first creating a Supabase application. And so I've already done that here. We're just calling it Keyri QR example. Let's first create an application on the Keyri dashboard. So after you sign up for Keyri on app.keyri.com, you'll be presented with this sort of screen. So let's create uh, an application for this. So let's call this Supabase test. And here, providing the domain URL is very important. And this is the domain on which this web application will ultimately be deployed. Of course, you can do local testing in the meanwhile, but in order to actually use it in production, you have to specify the domain URL here. And so for this example, we will be just deploying this on Vercel. Of course, Vercel provides you with a domain, and so you can simply copy this domain and paste that into the domain URL. Then you can specify whatever plan you'd like. You can start off on the free plan, and with that, just click Add Application. Now, once you've created the application in the Keyri dashboard, just come down to the Setup and Credentials area. You'll see that you've been given an application ID and an application key. You don't need to verify your domain just yet. If you come down here, you'll see App Settings. And this is a totally optional step, but specifying these properties for your production mobile app will allow users to simply scan this QR code from their phone's camera app, and with that be deep linked into your app and initiate the QR login process. We won't really deal with this just yet. Now, let's go ahead and get started with actually creating the Next.js application. So I've created a directory for this project. Now let's just create the next app. Now that we have this next application set up, let's go ahead and launch the development server. And we have this entire dummy project. We'll be getting rid of pretty much all of this. First order of business, let's just create the Supabase client. To do that, let's make a utils folder. And in order to actually make this, we need to install the Supabase library. All right, now that that's set, let's import create client. And we need to just pass in two parameters here. One is the Supabase URL as well as the anon key for that project. We can get those from the Supabase dashboard. Here's our URL. Here's our anon key. And that's that for that part. Next up, let's make some components. The first component that we'll make is the auth component. That's basically the login screen. Now for the auth screen, you can effectively pull much of the code from this tutorial. We'll be doing it slightly differently, but it's effectively the same thing. And so here we've just set up some of the states. We're setting everything to either false or blank. Um, Here the loadings are initially false. Here the email and password inputs are all initially blank. And so here is the most important part of setting up Keyri QR login. We're adding an event listener that will listen to the outputs of the Keyri QR widget and process them. So we'll do this via use effect. So here first we're just setting up a filter for the event listener. First of all, the event has to be of the type Keyri. There has to be data within that event, and the source of that event has to be that web page. And so this last part just makes sure that any events emitted by your user's browser extensions don't end up triggering this event listener. Now let's start processing this event. Now here, if there is no error in that data in the event, we're going to pull out the refresh token that is passed to it. And there will be more details about this in the second part of the series, but effectively what's happening is the mobile app is bundling up the refresh token that is currently live within that app and sending it to the web app. And the web app is using that refresh token to log the user in. And we'll set up a little handle QR login function below. And now let's just close off this use effect. Now we'll just set up some bog standard Supabase authentication functions. First, handle login. Then we'll set up our handle QR login. Now that we have this rather important use effect all set up, we'll set up some standard Supabase authentication functions, and then we'll set up our handle QR login function. Let's set up the regular handle login function. So now that we have the standard sign up and login function set up, let's do our QR login function. And so this is going to look a lot like the regular login function, except instead of the sign in Supabase method, we're going to use the set session method. And so here we're using the Supabase set session method and passing in the refresh token. That in turn is giving us back either a session object or an error. And so there's our full handle QR login function. Very importantly, basically we're just using the Supabase auth set session method, passing in the refresh token that we get from the event listener, and this method here is returning either a session object or an error. And that's the hard part done. And now we're just going to write some HTML, or JSX rather. And so right down here, I've pasted in some JSX, and we'll get to these class names and the CSS in a moment. But really, the important bit here is that we're including the Keyri QR widget, which takes the form of an iframe. And so really it's just an HTML page that has to be hosted on the same origin as the rest of your web app. And rather importantly, in order to test it on your local server, we just need to pass in this environment param. We'll call it just dev. And then we need to pass in the origin param so that the local server knows what account this widget points to. And so, of course, we registered a Keyri account with this domain, and so that's what this origin has to be. Now, of course, we need to get this Keyri QR HTML file, and we can get that from Keyri docs. So go to docs.keyri.com, come down into the browser section, and we're serving up this HTML file here. Copy it, come down into your public folder, call it keyriqr.html, paste, save. And you're done with the rather important auth component. Let's build now the account component, which is just the screen that comes after you either sign up or log in this auth component. And actually, just given that we're using this quick start here, there's an avatar component. So we should probably just make that first. So in addition to this account component, let's make an avatar.js component. And so for this avatar component, we're really just going to copy and paste from the Supabase example. There's no need to really customize it. And save and Let's just close out of this. Uh, the account component similarly is identical to the Supabase example in the documentation. So we're just going to copy and paste that because it really doesn't have anything to do with a Keyri QR login. That's all been handled in the auth.js component. And now we need to tie everything together in index.js. And so here we're setting up some basic Supabase auth related items, basically making sure that if there is a session, then um, that session should be used for that user's visit, and that the session object should be loaded into the browser. And now we're done with index.js. Now the important part here is really the auth related components. So here we're defining some states for the session, and as soon as the page is loaded, use effect, and if there is a session, then set session. And now let's just make it look nice. So let's come into globals.css. We don't need to get too fancy, and we can really just, now for styling, of course, we can just copy and paste from the Supabase documentation for their example. It looks pretty nice already. Now with that all set up, let's see if it works. And here we are. The QR code is rendering as expected, and we can sign in and of course sign up if we don't have an account yet. And that's it for creating the web app. Thanks for watching. Please stay tuned for part 2, in which we create a Flutter app that includes the Keyri SDK and actually allows you to scan this QR code and get logged in into this web app.